You're listening to the Restoration Podcast, conversations of hope and healing. Join us as we talk about subjects dealing with ministry, faith, everyday life, and other hot topics. Our prayer is that these conversations bring encouragement to your life. Who you are and how we're connected.
Okay.
So it's funny because we've actually never met in person.
I know.
So the way that Pastor Lexie and I are connected is that she is the worship pastor, and I'll let you say, well, let's do that. Tell us who you are and what you do, where you work at.
Okay, cool. Well, my name is Lexie Stavely. I am the worship pastor at O'Fallon Assembly of God, or just O'Fallon Assembly. It's in O'Fallon, Illinois, which is basically a suburb of St. Louis, Missouri. It's just on the other side of the river, but we're only about 20 minutes from St. Louis. And my pastor is Pastor Don Andreasen, and pastor's son, Devin, went to college with Aaron. So that's kind of our connection, but
That's the connection.
Aaron, you feel free to dive more into that.
Yeah, so Devin is my best friend, one of my closest friends I met in college, and his dad, as Pastor Lexie just said, is a pastor in O'Fallon, Illinois, and Lexie is the worship pastor there currently. And so we're sort of connected that way. But the other reason I felt a connection to you specifically was because when you started on that position, when did you start that in that position you're in now?
It was July of 2021.
So I started in my position August 2021. So
Gotcha.
It was like,
so basically
I was like,
same
okay,
time.
I feel like the transition season you were in, I was also in, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of our connection. Plus, now that we're worship pastors, if there's a worship pastor at another church, they're in our network. We're connected. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of like
definitely.
because so before this, I was a teacher. So same thing there. If there was a teacher, I get it. We're colleagues or whatever. And so kind of a new world for me, at least, being a worship pastor. But you're the worship pastor at O'Fallon Assembly, and I've been there a few times, but it's been a very long time. What are your responsibilities? I think we can assume that you lead worship and you're in charge of that. But O'Fallon Assembly is a lot like our church, Restoration Church, in that we're kind of in between. We're not really small church. We're not really a big church, right? You're kind of in between. So what all do you do? What all are you responsible for?
Yeah, I'm sure you can relate. We do a little bit of everything. I mean, it's definitely not just what's on the job description paper you get on day one or before day one. But yeah, so obviously my main roles are over the worship and the tech ministry. Our youth pastor here has been great at kind of putting me under his wing for the tech stuff, because I didn't know a ton about that before I got here, and I still have a ton of learning to do.
Same.
With that, yeah, it's that's been difficult, but it's been good, getting to stretch. But obviously over the worship and that all that it entails. But my husband and I also lead the young adult ministry, so that's something specific to our church. And a lot of times, I would say, if there's other people in our situation, people that are just getting out of college or maybe just getting into this field, a lot of times your first role at a church, you're going to be doing multiple different things and leading multiple different ministries.
Right.
Whether, like my husband, he leads the connections team, like the first impressions or whatever you want to call it. Like, there's just lots of different things that you're going to get put, under your belt, and it's cool. You get to stretch, you get to learn. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know if you knew this or not, but I actually am currently leading our young adult ministry as well here at Restoration Church.
What?
So
I did not know that.
Yeah, we just keep adding more to the similarities we have.
For real.
And so tech and worship, which by the way, those two alone is a lot of time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
And then to add more on top of that, but like you said, your first job you land won't necessarily be just what you're looking for. It's like that in every field, I want to say. Because, but like I said, before this, I was a teacher and I wanted to be a band director. That was a dream. Well, my first teaching job, which actually was my only teaching job before coming here, I taught band, but I also taught pre-K through second grade general music. And that was,
oh, wow.
That is not what I, I didn't like envision that. But I
Right.
did it,
Right.
and it stretched me, and I learned a lot. And same here.
Yeah.
I oversee worship and tech just like you. And then this young adult thing, kind of the Lord opened that door, and I said yes to that. And so yeah. But
Mhm.
like I said, worship and tech takes a lot of time. I mentioned on a previous podcast that there's a misconception. I want to know your opinion on this. There's a misconception that worship pastors, all they do is just pick songs for Sunday, right?
Oh, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly. There's so much more, right? And
Yes.
even picking, it's not like, I don't know about you, but I don't have a wheel with song titles on it in my office and just spin it, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
it
Definitely.
takes
Definitely
thought,
not.
yeah, consideration, and a lot of different factors. But
Mhm.
you were talking about the technology thing. How has that been such you used the word difficult, I think, with tech? Why has it been that way? Or was all of it kind of new to you when you got there?
Oh, it was definitely new. And the little bit that I did know was from my internship before at a different church before I came here, and they used all different stuff. So
Yes.
it was still like starting over, and it can be like that coming from any church. I feel like you learn it one way, but then you
Right.
get to another church and they do it a whole different way. So it was all new, and I'm just not really a huge techie person. Like that just doesn't click with me in the first place. So my brain just kind of doesn't work that way. So it's been difficult to try to learn, but you don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
So you just kind of got to.
Yeah, you have no choice. You're exactly right about
Yeah.
that. And what's funny about you saying I'm not a techie person is most worship pastors are the go-to tech gurus. You know,
True.
like something's going
True.
wrong. Oh, just call the worship pastor. I bet they know how to fix it, right? And
True.
I hope you've been fitting into that role as well. But we've connected back and forth a handful of times on for different reasons, and one of them was it was one of our first like back and forth messages. I think I just asked you like, what are your responsibilities? Because again, we both started at the same time, and I was just curious.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned programming tracks, and I believe y'all use Ableton. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when I got this, I don't know about you, but when I got in this position, that was just an unknown world to me. Okay. I knew nothing
Yeah.
about how tracks ran or how to even like start up the program itself or how it spoke to the soundboard and went out to our stream. I didn't know.
Yeah.
And is that how you work
No,
too?
same. Yeah. I mean, the little bit I did know, again, was from my internship, and they used a different thing. It started with a D. I don't even remember what it was called. That's how much it stuck with
Sure.
me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, getting here, having to learn Ableton, which is I think one of the more complicated ones, or at least it's just
I
more
agree.
has a lot more things you can do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just a lot to learn, and it's not super, worship music friendly. It's kind of, to my understanding, it's more for like a producer
Yeah.
side. So it was just a lot of options that we don't really need. So it was a lot to take on, and I didn't know really what I was doing at the beginning. Just like you, I really had to with the lady that was the interim worship leader. But when I got here, I had her show me exactly what she did, and I literally wrote down every single step. I was like, you click this, you
Yeah.
drag and drop here, you open this, and I wrote it down every single thing. I referenced that paper for the first like year that I was
Wow.
here until I finally figured out how to do it without looking at the paper.
So
So
where you are
yeah.
now compared to day one, is your knowledge just completely like grown since day one? Would you say?
Oh yeah, I was definitely agree with that.
Yeah, same. So that was a question I was going to ask, but you answered it. You had someone that kind of showed you the ropes. You followed an interim worship pastor, correct?
Yes, and I mean I did, and but the thing was that this wasn't really her passion, so
Gotcha.
she did a great job, and she still is here serving with us, which is incredible. But yeah, she had kind of learned from the last guy that was the full time worship pastor. So I was kind of learning. It was like a game of telephone sort of thing. Like she
Yeah.
learned from him, and I learned from her, and so I feel like there might have been some miscommunications and stuff in there, or maybe just some stuff that was missed. But overall, it was still good.
Well, that's good that you had someone to go to because not everyone has that luxury in the church world,
True.
especially. Sometimes pastors leave for not great reasons and they're just gone. So the next guy or
Right.
lady has no one to go to.
Yeah.
Hopefully this will encourage you, but we uniquely still have the worship pastor before me, my predecessor. He's still on staff here. Um,
Oh, wow.
yeah, we did a church plant in a nearby town, and he actually is the lead pastor there, which is why his position was open, which is why I'm here.
Gotcha.
But
Gotcha.
he still comes to staff meetings and stuff. So I was very fortunate to have him around. You know, I saw him week
Mhm.
to week. And again, I hope this encourages you or anyone listening. My first like year, I must have called and texted him like at least 2 or 3 times a day. Like,
Yeah.
what do I do here? What's going on? I sent him a picture like, what's going on? Why is this not talking to whatever? And
Right.
slowly over time, less, and now I probably count on one hand how many times I've reached out with a tech question for him. Um, and so that's what it's like in any field, right? You learn more as you go. You have no choice, like you said. You have no
Yeah.
choice. You've got to figure it
True.
out because it's the job, you know.
Right.
And then
Right.
someday, when the Lord opens your next assignment, you're going to be the go-to person. Can you believe that?
No, I can't actually, but I think it's gonna happen. But
you're
that's crazy.
you'll be the expert. Like you'll be the
Yeah,
person
that
with
is
all
wild.
the answers. You know, going from not knowing anything to be the person with all the answers. You know, but
Yeah.
so I'm curious, and I've wanted to know how on earth you or why you landed at O'Fallon Assembly. So can you talk a little bit about where you went to college and then maybe your connection with O'Fallon because you weren't attending there, correct? Before or were
No,
you?
no, I'd never even been to this area of the country.
Most people don't.
So
Uh-huh. Sorry, continue.
yeah. No, you're right.
Yeah.
So so I went to Lee University. It is a uh private Christian college in Cleveland, Tennessee.
Yep.
So I actually grew up in Memphis, Tennessee,
Oh, very cool.
and I ended up at Lee because well, I mean, obviously I felt the Lord calling me there, and there was a
Sure.
lot of just connections that way. But I heard about it in the first place because my choir teacher knew one of the directors of a choir there. So anyway, I ended up at Lee, and I joined a choir for it was an all women's choir called the Ladies of Lee, and I was in that for my entire college experience.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the girls in the choir was from this church. She was from
Okay.
O'Fallon. And when we were about to graduate, we're all looking for jobs and that sort of thing. But my situation and your situation probably was maybe a little unique because it was COVID times. And so not a lot of jobs were necessarily open. A lot of
Sure.
churches
Yeah.
were closed and things like that. So I actually I graduated in December, ended up moving home for a couple months until I officially moved here in July. But she was the one who told me that her church back home was looking for a worship pastor.
Mm.
So she gave me Pastor Don's contact info, and we talked for 3 or 4 months before we actually made that first visit up here, and then I came back a second time to do kind of the audition, whatever you want to call it, where
Leading
you
on a
lead
Sunday.
for
Yeah.
a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do that too.
And then so after that we accepted and moved up here, or I moved up here in July, and then got married in October, and then my husband moved up here beginning of November. So that is how I learned about this place. But seriously, the two visits I had up here for interviews, that was the only times I'd ever been here before I just picked up everything I had and moved. So
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, that's how it is sometimes when you graduate college, you're just like whatever door opens, you know.
Yeah, seriously.
So did you have any other churches that you reached out to or reached out to you, or was O'Fallon the only one?
Yeah, no, we had a few others,
Okay.
but this was the one that, just I felt led
Seemed like
to.
the right fit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then what did you major in at Lee University?
Yeah, so I was a music major. I was specifically a music and worship major. A lot of places call it a church music major, but
Sure.
they call it music and worship. And so I ended up getting a Bachelor of Music with a vocal emphasis. Um, so that's what it is. But I ended up, through that having to pass piano proficiency.
Oh yeah.
So now at church, I'll lead from keys and vocally.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But you were a vocal primary, so you're a vocalist first, correct?
Yes, by far. I never touched a piano before I got to
Oh
college,
wow.
and yeah, it was very very difficult. That was honestly, my hardest class, harder than music history, was
Oh,
piano,
really?
just
Wow.
because I feel like it's a whole new language. And I was 18 at that point, so you're
Right.
basically an adult trying to learn a new language.
Right.
And my hands just didn't want to work, but
Right.
it paid off. I'm very glad that we have to do that.
And now you lead behind a keyboard. Do you do that every Sunday or
Yes.
you
No, not every Sunday. We have a rotation of keyboardists, so I'm about every 2 or 3 Sundays.
okay. Yeah, very cool. And then you said you were part of
Yeah.
a choir, an all ladies choir in Lee. Was that probably like the highlight and like best memories were with that choir when you were there of
Oh,
college?
by far.
Mhm.
I honestly didn't love college. If it,
Oh,
and I
wow.
probably would have maybe switched colleges if it wasn't for this
Wow.
choir. This
Wow.
choir was, I mean, life changing. It was so incredible. My directors, I had a director, Dr. Jonathan Rogers, for my freshman year, and then sophomore, junior, senior, I had Dr. Randy Sheeks. And Dr. Randy Sheeks is actually the lead of the music and worship department at Lee. So we already knew each other that way,
Mhm.
and now we got to travel together and all that sort of stuff through the choir. And so I just felt like it was just, a family. It was so great. So the ladies of Lee, anyone listening, get them to come to your church. They're awesome.
Yeah, and that was my next question was it a touring choir, a touring group?
Yes, yeah, we
Where all
toured.
did you travel to?
We were mostly around the southeast. I think we would do a spring and a fall tour, so those were out a little further. I think like the furthest we went was like DC, Maryland area, and then we've been to Orlando, we went to Hilton Head, but most of the time, like weekend to weekend, we were just within 2 or 3 hours going to different churches. We actually ended
Sure.
up going to my home church in Memphis for a fall break, which was
While
the
you were
day
in the
before
choir?
COVID. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was when I was in the choir, and it was like really our last trip before everything shut down and then I
Right.
graduated. So that was cool, but I didn't know it was my last thing, so that was weird. But
Right.
actually, COVID canceled our second international tour. I did get to go to Costa Rica with them my
Oh,
freshman
wow.
year, but right before I graduated, we were supposed to go to 5 countries in Europe, and it was fully funded and everything, and then
Uh,
it got canceled. So
yeah, I mean,
really
you're not
sucked,
the
but
only
oh
one.
well.
My
True.
wife's brother and his now wife, they were part of concert orchestra, which I'll open that can of worms here in a moment. But they were supposed
Mm.
to go to Europe, and same thing happened to them. It shut
Ah,
down. So I feel
so
your pain
sad.
there. Yeah, but that's
Yeah.
awesome that you were a part of that. What kind of repertoire did y'all sing? Did y'all do all like gospel stuff? Did y'all do like general choral repertoire, worship? What kind of choir was it? Was it like a worship choir? Was it like a read sheet music choir, or all the above?
We actually did a little bit of everything, I would say. I thought it was a great mix. I mean, you're asking me, that's what I would say. Other people might say otherwise, but I thought it was a great mix of stuff. We did stuff from contemporary worship to, Italian, German,
Oh
whatever
yeah.
other
Mhm.
language
Yep.
pieces. So I thought it was a great mix. There was actually also a pull-out group from the choir called Hilltop Worship, and that was just a group of us, like maybe I don't know, 7 or 8 ladies that went and just did like we would lead worship. So that was obviously just all contemporary
Mm,
Christian worship songs. But yeah, the choir did a little bit of everything.
that's really cool. Do you
Yeah.
have aspirations to have them come visit O'Fallon? Question mark.
Yes, I do. They actually have a new director now,
How's
so
that
I've been
going?
talking with him.
Okay.
And yes, I asked them last year, but that was when they were doing their international tour. They went to France this
Sure.
past summer, so they were just kind of focused on that. So he said to put a pin in it for 2025.
Huh.
And I've actually talked with my director, Dr. Randy Sheeks. He's now the leader of another choir at Lee. So I was like, I'm
Mm,
going to get one of you guys up here,
get them right.
and yeah, so that'll be good. I'm really looking forward to that. Hopefully sometime next year.
Yeah. So I had two dreams. Well, yeah. So I was part of a similar group, but it was called concert orchestra, and then later it
Mhm.
changed to Sinfonia. I actually don't think
Mm.
I've talked about this group with on this podcast yet, but it was through Evangel University where I went, and it was basically a traveling orchestra. So we'd go and we'd play at churches. So we'd take over and do a worship set and play, basically take over the whole service, just play repertoire. But
Yeah.
I had a dream when I was in college, an aspiration. I was like, I would love for concert orchestra to go to my home church, and it happened. So while I was in concert orchestra, we went down to Houston, my home church, and I'm never going to forget that. Such a special memory. And I guess they liked it so
Absolutely.
much that they went back again when I had already
That's awesome.
graduated, and someone actually
Aw.
FaceTimed me and put me on the music stand, so I was there all night.
That's
Anyway,
so cool.
but now I have a different dream. Now I dream of hosting concert orchestra here at Restoration Church.
Yeah.
Hasn't happened yet, which is another one of the few times we've communicated was they're called Symphonia now. They actually recently came to O'Fallon Assembly, and you had asked me a little
Yes.
bit about it. And at the time, I mean, I've been out of college since I graduated in 2016, and there were
Gotcha.
rumors of no more Symphonia. And so when you had messaged me that, I was like, they don't exist? Question mark. Like, I was
Yeah.
so confused. And then and then you had asked me about how flow went because you were in communications with Dr. Dismore, who's still there. And if he's
Right.
listening, Dr. Dismore, I'm here, Sioux City, Iowa. I'd love to have Symphonia, but that's another dream. I'd love to host, and just like you, I'm willing to take any evangel ensemble. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I'm in contact with the music department chair, and they have a few choirs that tour, and so that's a possibility. Don't quote me on that, people that attend our
Yeah.
church,
Yep.
but I would love to host. I would love to host an evangel. An ensemble from my alma mater, right? It's
Yeah,
just different,
definitely.
and to show them like, look, you can
Mhm.
make it. You know what I mean? But
Mhm.
that's amazing. How was the Symphonia Sunday? Was that a pretty good experience? Was it pretty well
Oh,
received?
it was great. It was so nice. And I mean, they just did an incredible job, and even the director, he kind of shared a bit of his testimony.
Yeah,
And it just was personal. I mean, that's kind of the thing about orchestra music is I feel like sometimes it's not personal because there's not like lyrics that you
sure.
can connect with that way, but when they speak before they play the song or whatever, and they say kind of what it means, the backstory, that sort of thing, it immediately becomes personal, and they did just a great job with that. So highly recommend.
Yeah, I'd love to have them. I'm an instrumentalist at heart as well. I mean,
Mhm.
I sing, for my job, but I like to say this way that my voice was my first instrument because I've been singing ever since I was like 3. I'm assuming you started singing young too, right? Can you remember how young you were when you started like an interest in
Yeah,
singing?
probably. I mean, probably just for fun, around 3 or 4.
Right.
But I started doing like competitions and stuff. I think around third grade.
Very cool. And then are you a product of public school, private school, homeschool, K through 12?
Um, it was actually a private school that my church has,
Okay.
so they're still there. So First Assembly Memphis is the church I grew up in,
Okay.
and they have a K through 12 school. So I went there K through 12.
Very cool. And did they have choir there or not really?
They did, yes. They had choir. I was in choir every time the doors were open. I was definitely teacher's pet.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's good. But and then you've never, other than keys, did you ever play an instrument, violin, clarinet,
No,
anything like that?
no, never played any instrument. I should have. I regret it very much, but I never played any instrument.
You regret it? What would
And
you
I
have
just
wanted
kind of,
to pick up and try if you could go back?
well, I just think it's great for any worship leader to play
Sure.
piano and guitar. I think piano probably first,
Sure.
but guitar is also great because it's a lot more portable. And then drums, I think, would be third just because everyone's always needing,
Oh,
like, I feel
yeah.
like that's probably the least, you know, what am I trying to say? It's hardest to find a drummer,
Yeah,
a good
everyone's
drummer.
short drummers.
And rhythm is great for you to have instilled in you.
Right.
So I think drums is a third best.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say something. I felt led to say this on this episode and to you specifically. If anyone's listening and you're aspiring to be a worship pastor, a worship leader, don't minimize yourself because you don't play an instrument. I felt led to say that
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
being a vocalist is very important. I mean, let's think about this. Like without the vocals, there's nothing to sing along to. That's the main part.
Right,
If anything,
right.
everyone else is actually accompanying the voice, right?
Yeah,
And the other thing I
so
want to
true.
say too is, well, number one, don't look down on yourself. Anyone listening, if you're just a vocalist, it's not
Yeah,
just a vocalist. You are a vocalist. I don't like the term. You're just a
exactly.
vocalist. Okay. And the other thing I
So
wanted to
true.
say was, vocalist. Just because you're a vocalist doesn't mean that you can't have knowledge of chords or arrangements. Right.
Right.
I grew up with some really talented worship leaders at my home church who could not. I mean, couldn't even. If you told them to play a C on the piano, they couldn't find it. but they
Mm.
could tell you, the progression of the song, or they could lead a rehearsal. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, vocalists are very important. And if you're an aspiring worship leader slash worship pastor and you are a vocalist, don't don't not apply because you don't think you're going to get it because the guy who plays guitar and bass and
Right.
drums is going to get it. No, no, no. You were just as anointed. You know what I mean? There's
Absolutely.
anointed singers, there's anointed vocalists and instrumentalists. The anointing doesn't pass over someone that only sings. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, that is so
You
true.
very much can have the anointing in your voice. And so I felt
And
led
on
to say
that
that.
note,
Yeah.
yes, no, that's great. And on that note, I would add that um, if you are a singer, don't think that you can't learn an
Oh,
instrument,
that's good.
even if no matter your
That's
age.
good.
Because I mean, that was me. I was like,
Sure.
I'm too old for this. I can't do it. This is so hard, and it is going to be
It
so
is. It
hard.
is. It is difficult.
But you can do it. You can do it.
That's
I'll
good.
just
I
leave it at
like
that.
that. Yeah. Well, while we're in that, maybe there's someone listening or people listening who are they're considering being a worship pastor or a worship leader. You and I started, like we said, in 2021, and so we've kind of
Yep.
had a very similar timeline. Um,
Mhm.
what advice or counsel would you give a new worship pastor or like a first year worship pastor or worship leader? When I was a teacher and in that world, there was just a really known fact, which I'm sure most people know, is that there's nothing more difficult than the first year of teaching. And
Yeah.
it's true. It's very true. Ask
Yeah.
any teacher, any veteran teacher that's done it for 30 years, ask them, was the first year difficult? I'll be like, yes, you just have to get through it. And so now that I'm in a different area now of worship, I think it's the same thing. I think the
Yeah.
first year or first day is very difficult. But what advice or counsel would you give to a new worship pastor?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to echo that. That is absolutely it. Is that don't let those beginning moments burn you out or tear you down. Because it gets better, and even if it doesn't, which I think it will, but even if it doesn't, or even if it didn't, it's worth it because you are doing this for the kingdom. This isn't for your own
Hmm.
glory or your own. It's definitely not for the salary for most people. It's for the kingdom, and
That's
so
good.
it's worth it. The hard work is worth it. The learning curve is worth it, and you can't say that about a lot of secular jobs
It's
because
true.
what's it for at the end of the day?
That's good.
And you can say what this is for. It is worth it because he is worth it.
That's good. I like that. Um, I would also say to anyone who's considering this, um, I would say invest in your team slash volunteers.
Mm. Mhm.
I'm in a unique position because, like I said, my predecessor is still around, but his
Yeah.
predecessor is also still on staff. So,
What?
yeah, so I have the previous
Wow.
worship pastor and then the previous worship pastor who is now our executive pastor. And
That's so cool.
he had a great I'm very blessed. He had a
Yeah.
great saying, and we said it on this podcast, and I wanted to share this with you and our listeners. He said that being a worship pastor is 80% people, 20% music. Would
Mm.
you say that that's accurate or pretty close?
Oh, it's so true. I mean, you can't even get to the music if you don't love on your people because there's going
Yes.
to be no one there to play the music if
Yes.
you are not treating your people well. So you have got to, I mean, do what you're doing with networking with other people to get the resources and the contacts that you need, but even just the people in your church that are your volunteers, that are your new families, that are your old families, whatever, you have got to make them a priority before you even worry about playing the right notes. It
Mm.
is about the people, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And I at first I was like, he's over exaggerating. And then not even like a month in, I
Yeah,
was like, oh, this is true. Which, and I mentioned
yeah,
this before, like if you're wanting to be a worship pastor, the music part, it should be easy, right? That's why you're considering it
right,
and that's why you're pursuing it. It's all the other stuff that is kind of the uphill battle. People,
absolutely.
recruiting, scheduling can be tricky. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
having to oversee a budget if you've never done that before can be kind of scary.
Yeah.
Every
Mhm.
church is different, but you report to your senior or lead pastor, and when that pastor hires you, they have trust in you to handle all those things, and it can be very overwhelming for a first year worship pastor or worship leader to have
Right.
to have answers to all these questions, or to have, to have these expectations put on you. I remember when I got
Right.
hired here, one of the big things that Restoration Church was known for was their big Christmas Eve services, and we'll get to that with y'all here in a second. And it was August, and they're like, "What do you got planned?" And I'm like, "Guys, it's August," and they were like, "No, you better start planning now." You know,
Yeah.
and now I understand that. But would you say that you have a favorite part of your job, of what you do?
Yeah. Yeah. I think my favorite part is just watching these musicians and vocalists become worshipers.
Hmm.
Like that is just my favorite thing is watching when they kind of make that switch and you can just see it in their heart and in their posture and their questions even like they become so much more God focused and people focused
Right.
than um, meticulous focused and so I just love watching when we get a new family, for example, and this guy's like, "Hey, I've taught, just for example, I've taught guitar lessons for 20 years, and I want to join your team. I've never been on a church team, but I want to join." And so I'm like, "Okay, great. We do this, this, and this to prep you and make sure you're ready for the team and make sure you want to be part of this church." And by the time we get them on the team, they're slowly dropping those chains of making sure it's perfect for themselves and we are trying to do our best now for the Lord.
Hmm.
And so watching them just leave off the title of musician or guitar player or pianist or whatever it is and put on the label of worshiper, that is just my favorite part of the job. It is so incredible and no one gets the point of view that we do. And I think we
Hmm.
have the best point of view on that.
Wow, that was a beautiful answer. What a very
Thanks.
what a very pastoral answer. That's amazing. Yeah, it's very unique, the role that we're in, and the things that we get to
Yeah.
do, and how we get to connect with people, and how we get to see them grow. I 100% agree with you on that. I too love what I love to see, and this is the teacher in me. Again, I believe I
Mhm.
was put on this earth to be a teacher, and
Yeah.
pastoring is teaching, right?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I love seeing something very similar. I love seeing the growth in volunteers, whether it's spiritual
Mhm.
or musical.
Yeah.
Giving a new drummer a chance who needs a lot of guidance or whatever. The teacher in me
Yeah.
is like, this drummer or whatever, instrumentalist or vocalist, they won't improve unless you give them the opportunity to improve. You know what I mean?
Right.
I could
Mhm.
very much, have someone try out or audition and be like, you're not ready, come back in a year or whatever. Or I can give them the opportunity and the tools, of course. We can't just, we have to help, um,
Right.
and empower people. That's one of my favorite words to live by, is empower. I always ask myself on occasion, like, Aaron, are you really truly empowering your volunteers? Because,
Mm.
in our role, we are entrusted to be good stewards of the people that the Lord has given us, right? And I'm
Yeah.
always like,
Right.
am I really empowering her? Am I really empowering him? And I ask myself that a lot. But I love what you said. You said it so beautifully, that you like seeing them become worshipers. I love that, because that's what we, in essence, that's what we all are, whether we're on the platform or in the pew, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so I love that. That's amazing. What a beautiful answer.
Well, thank you. I
Uh,
agree with yours too, and that challenges me. Like it's
sure.
something you got to ask yourself: Are we empowering our people?
Yeah. Have you read any, like, worship books or pastor books that have kind of helped you, or not? Are you much of a reader, or not really?
Well, this might be a cheat code, but I'm more of an audiobook
Oh, that works.
listener.
That counts.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I yeah, don't read a lot physically, but I like to listen. And so, I'm trying to think of the last book I read or listened to that was worship. I listened to a lot of just Christian books in
Sure.
general.
Yeah.
And we actually go through them in our Sunday school class. So right now we're going through Priscilla Shirer, one of her books about
Oh,
Elijah,
love her.
and before that, which could go to worshiping or worship ministry as well, is a book by Andy Stanley called Visioneering,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, it just kind of talks about the vision that you need to have and how we are called to be dreamers. And I believe it was referencing about Nehemiah,
Mhm.
but that's an incredible book. Definitely would recommend. But um, What about you? Do you read any books about worship specifically?
Glad you asked. So yes,
Hmm.
when I first got hired, actually, I don't know, I don't know if Pastor Don's this way, but a lot of pastors, most pastors, they're actually like they're readers. Has he read a lot of
Oh
books and has
yeah,
books in his office, like
yeah.
shelves and shelves? Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I felt not very much not like a pastor because I am not a reader. I am very much
Yeah.
not a reader. I can't say that enough. And then I married someone, my wife is very much a reader.
Mhm.
She's read so many books, she can burn through them, and I'm just not. And I've tried to improve that. But I say all that
Yeah.
because when I first got hired, our executive pastor, who was the previous worship pastor, he gave me
Yep.
some books, and so did my predecessor. And it was funny because they both recommended one called, I think it was called The First 90 Days. And that's not a
Hmm.
spiritual book, it's just a book in general to help you with the first 90 days of a new job, whatever it is.
Oh,
But
that's
when you
cool.
read it, it's applicable even to this, okay? I'm gonna be honest,
Mhm.
okay? And the mic is on. I did not finish it. Like, I mean, it had some good stuff, and I was marking stuff. I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, but I didn't finish it. I couldn't. However,
I understand.
another book that uh, the executive pastor gave me, and if you haven't read it, Lexi, I will personally like send you a copy because it's so effective. What was it called? It's so good, I can't remember. Uh,
Yeah, right.
The Way of the Shepherd. Have you read that book?
No, I haven't. I'm gonna write
Okay,
that down.
this book was it's probably the first book that I read that literally you hear stories about, oh, I read this and it changed my life, and I'm like, yeah, right. Well, I read this one and it literally changed my view on leadership. It's called The
Mm.
Way of the
Wow.
Shepherd, and it's all about leading people and shepherding people. And it's a short book too. It's a quick read. Anyone listening, I
Oh,
recommend that
love
if you
that.
want to be. I know, me too. And so that one I burned through, and that's how you know a book is good to me is if I burn through it. Okay, because I don't
Right.
read, like I
Right.
said. Um, and then another one that I read that was really great on spiritual leadership, and this is for anyone listening, if you're a volunteer that leads a class, or if you're a worship pastor or a pastor, it's called Lead So Others Can Follow, written by Dr. Jim Bradford, who was a guest on this podcast. That is a
Oh, that's
book
cool.
about spiritual leadership. So if you're anyone that's in a leadership role and it just talks about how to lead others, that was another good one that really helped me see things from a different viewpoint. I still, as a matter of fact, pull from that. We recently hired a media director who is kind of under me. I'm kind of her supervisor, which that's crazy. I never thought I'd be a supervisor over anyone. That's hilarious. That's laughable. But anyway, when she started a media team, and she just was asking for advice on how do I lead them, how do I do this or that. I said here, and I gave her a copy of both of those actually, and she read them and she said it really helped. But
Oh.
then currently, I'm reading a book called Spark by Jeff Deo. You know Jeff
Oh
Deo.
yeah.
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 And this one is very worship specific. It's really good. Jeff Dale, if you're listening, which I highly doubt he listens to this podcast, but I started this like 2 or 3 months ago. Not only am I not a reader, but when I do read, I'm slow.
I'm the same way.
So I'm gonna get there, I promise. But anyway, I
Yeah.
plan on buying all of my worship team members a copy of that one because it's really good. What I've read so
Oh,
far
that's
is
cool.
good, and I've never done like a book study with the worship team, and I've heard of churches that do that, and I may
Yeah.
do that. I may just give it as a gift. I don't know, but that's a really good one. I think you would like that. But I'll put links in the
Yeah.
description to all these books that we mentioned. But I don't remember how we got on that tangent. But books have been pretty helpful. But I'm not a reader, so
Yeah.
like
I totally
I
get it
don't
for real.
yeah I yeah, but So O'Fallon worship has a special place in my heart because, well, one, we established the connection about the Andreessen family, how I'm connected to them, but
Yeah.
and then I mentioned that I've been there a handful of times. One of them was with Concert Orchestra, actually right before our
Mhm.
European tour. Man,
Oh,
the Concert
cool.
Orchestra, they've been to your church like 5 times. They've been there a lot. Like we went my
Wow.
freshman year, and just because it was just on the route, I guess we always passed through St. Louis or something. Then we
Yeah.
went again my senior year, and then they went again. They love that church. But the other one is, and I've never shared this story, and I'll share it now. It's quick, I promise.
Okay.
I don't know if your church still does this or not, but I was visiting O'Fallon because I went home with Devin for Thanksgiving my freshman year for Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
and because O'Fallon's a lot closer to Springfield, which is where Evangel is located. I'm from Houston, Texas, and that's a very long drive, so it wasn't
Right.
worth Thanksgiving break because it's so short. But anyway, I went home with Devin for Thanksgiving, and I don't know if your church still does this or not, but there was like a Thanksgiving like service
I
that
knew where you were going with that. Yeah,
you
it's
knew.
a community Thanksgiving service.
Okay, to this day, and this was like 12 years ago, that impacted me so much because,
Really?
correct me if I'm wrong, from what I remember, it was like open to all churches, denominations. Is that correct? Am I remembering
Yeah,
correctly? Okay.
that is correct.
I don't know how you even start something like that or how they promote it and how people knew, but I remember I went and I was like very impacted by it because like it wasn't just our, denomination or fellowship rather. It was like all types of people, Baptists,
Right.
Pentecostals, Methodists, whatever, so many. And I was like, this is really cool. But the other reason why that's a monumental thing in my mind is because at the time, the worship pastor was this guy. I can't remember his name, but he was up there and he was doing his thing and he was very good. And I remember distinctly, this was almost 12 years ago. Can't believe that. I remember in my mind, I thought, I think I could do that job someday as a worship pastor.
Wow.
And little did I know that that was a seed that was planted that would later,
Yeah,
you know, sprout and come to be. But
that's so cool.
O'Fallon's very special to me for that reason because I
Oh,
remember that. I remember seeing him and I'm like, I could do that job. I bet I could do that. And at the time, I was, a freshman at Evangel studying music ed, had aspirations to be a band director. A worship pastor
yeah,
was absolutely nowhere on my radar at the time.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, that's kind of how that started, I think. So,
That is so cool. I'm
hmm
going to share that story when we meet for to plan that service. We're talking about it in just a couple weeks, and
very
so
cool.
that is really cool.
So I guess they still do it.
Yes,
Do y'all
they still
always
do it.
host it or?
No, no, it's at a different church every year, and it has different speakers every year, different worship every year. It's completely unique every year since we just kind of share who's leading what. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought it was really unique. A
Yeah,
little bit like what heaven's going to be like. It's going to be a mix of people.
absolutely.
I love that. But before we go, I thought maybe you'd want to share some fun stuff, the fun part of the job. By the way, this job is not always difficult, okay? People listening, it may seem, it is sometimes, okay? Dealing with people can be difficult and it can be stressful, it can be overwhelming, but this job can also be so much fun. Am I right?
Oh yeah,
So much
oh yeah,
fun. I can come home sometimes and like Tori, my wife, I'm like, I love my job. Like this is so much fun. But
absolutely.
what would you say are some like highlights or maybe some exciting things coming up for O'Fallon worship?
Yeah, so I think our biggest thing is Christmas that's coming up.
Yep.
And yeah, we've been planning it for months. And uh, our choir rehearsals start this Sunday. So just in a couple days, we are starting our choir practices. And then we have our weekly Christmas band practices and Christmas worship team practices. So it's about to get real hectic, but I love it. I love,
It's the
love,
fun
love
hectic.
Christmas. I love putting on the service. I mean, it is just so much fun, and I don't want to give away too much, but we have a really, really fun service planned for this year. It's something like we've never done before, and yeah, it's just going to be awesome, and I can't wait to share it with everybody and just let people fall in love with it like I did months ago when I thought about it and started prepping it. So
I like
yeah,
hearing
I'm
that.
really excited for that.
Yeah, so you have a choir. Do they sing for Christmas Eve and Easter basically only or
Yeah, they sing for Christmas and Easter. That's about it. I try to make it low commitment, really relaxed
yeah.
and simple and easy, and they seem to really enjoy that.
And you're in charge of that, correct?
Yes,
You run those rehearsals and stuff?
yes, I run those rehearsals. We do them Sundays right after church. So we just as soon as service is over, we just hop on over to um, a room and we practice until we all go to lunch. So yeah.
Very cool. Did you start that, or did they already have a choir that kind of came together for those services?
They already had it, but it's kind of a different mix of people every holiday, every
Yeah,
Christmas or Easter. You
same,
really never know who's going to end up signing up for a choir.
same. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have a worship choir here too that we started last year, I think. There's a
Mhm.
lady in our congregation who was a gospel choir director at her previous church, and she's one
Cool.
of our vocalists. And so I was like, let's tap into that. And so same
Yeah.
thing. It's we do it maybe once a quarter, maybe twice a year. We celebrate our 100 years this year. That was a big deal, so we had the choir for that.
Oh yeah,
But similar to you,
that's awesome.
it's different people each time. I never know who's, because schedules are busy, who's available.
Right,
People leave churches, people join the church. Um,
right.
but choir, I love choir. I don't know about your choir, but I love choir because, first of all, uh, like anyone could just kind of hop in and be a part of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
different ages and
Mhm.
different backgrounds, and I like that. I like seeing diversity in groups, and I like seeing inclusivity, and I just like
Yeah.
seeing. I'm a big firm believer in what I call cross generational interaction or fellowship.
Yeah.
What I mean by
Yeah,
that, I mean
definitely.
young and old and all in between. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I
Right.
look at our choir sometimes, and I don't know if you've ever thought this, but the people that have really gotten to know each other really well, because we do have people that do it every time. I think to myself, if it weren't for this choir, I'm not sure they would have ever interacted. Um,
Yeah,
Even
that's so
me, some of
true.
the people I've gotten to know, I would have probably never gotten to know really well had it not been for choir. And so I
That's
love
so
that.
true.
And every pastor, I'm sure Pastor Don would say the same thing. They love seeing a full platform, right? As many people
Oh
involved
yeah.
as possible.
Oh yeah.
And everyone loves Christmas, right? I
Yep.
Christmas is fun. That's the fun one. I mean, Easter's fine too, but it's just, jam packed in the like third or fourth month of the year, and I don't know,
Yeah.
it always sneaks up on you. Christmas is just everyone's in a good mood. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I feel like you have more time to prep for Christmas
Oh,
because I mean
yes.
basically as soon as Christmas is done, you got to start for
What's for
Easter.
Easter?
And so you have all summer to be thinking about Christmas.
So, answer this question. When did you start planning Christmas Eve? When did you start thinking about that this year? How early?
Christmas Eve?
Yeah, or Christmas, whatever you do.
Oh, well, for this service, it's on the 15th, so it's
Okay.
not for our Christmas
Is it
Eve,
on a
but
Sunday?
yes,
Gotcha.
yeah, it's on a Sunday morning.
Gotcha.
And this one, I mean, I had the idea at the end of last Christmas, our
Yeah.
service
That's what
last
I wanted
year.
to hear.
I was like, oh, I want to do this next
That's what I
year.
wanted to hear. Yeah.
So, yeah, things didn't start coming together like really, really flowing fast until the last couple months. But yeah, this idea has been brewing since last year.
Very cool. Uh,
Yeah.
um, Christmas Eve is also I I want to make this clear. I love Easter. Okay, like I love it.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you.
But there is just so much more repertoire for Christmas. There's so many
Yes,
Christmas carols and Christmas albums and Christmas songs and instrumentals, and
true.
Easter. Easter's tricky for me. I'm gonna be honest. It's a tricky one because there's
Yeah,
only
because I
so
mean it's
many.
only celebrated in the church, and
Yeah,
people everywhere celebrate Christmas, so it's there's just so much more music
that's a great
to
point.
be made.
Yeah, and like
Yeah,
there's also only so many Easter songs, and like
right.
it's kind of a the good and not so great thing about those songs that are themed about the cross or about the resurrection is you can do those all year long. You know what I mean?
Right.
You can't do Mary
Right.
Did You Know in July. I mean you could,
Right.
but like they're all
Yeah.
saved for December. You know what I mean? Whereas
Right.
you get to Easter and you're like, I mean this song fits, but we've done it like 10 times the past 3 months.
Yes.
It's
Yes,
just
that's so true.
Easter is a tricky one for me. And again, y'all,
Mhm.
I love Easter. Okay, I mean, if it wasn't for Easter, that's what our faith is based on. But Christmas Eve is a lot
Right.
of fun.
Right. So true.
So, so thank you so much for giving us time. I know you're busy. Um, I really appreciate it. I hope people were encouraged by your story. Our theme of this podcast is their conversations of hope and healing.
Mm.
So I want to give you one little last opportunity. I don't know if you have like a testimony or any last nuggets of advice to maybe bring encouragement to people listening. It doesn't have to be worship related or anything like that, but if you had any other last nuggets of wisdom, insight, encouragement, or something the Lord has been showing you lately or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe just on the theme of hope. That so the story about me not knowing how to play piano and then forcing myself to learn and it was extremely difficult is kind of just a microcosm of my life as far as getting into worship ministry is I didn't grow up with any family whatsoever in ministry. I
Hmm.
didn't know anybody in ministry. I still even out here in my current job I don't really know that many other worship pastors.
Sure.
And so from a lot of this, it just kind of seemed impossible and it seemed um, unattainable, and it was kind of silly for me to even attempt to do this. But if you have a call from the Lord, He's going to make a way. And He has called you there for a reason, and you may not know the reason, but it may just be to impact one person in your entire life. It may be for that one person, and it's worth it. Even if it's to give the Lord glory through your praise, it is worth it. So I just want to encourage you guys, if there's anyone listening that it feels called to do something, but you don't feel ready, you don't feel prepared, you don't feel able, give that to the Lord. Be honest with Him about your struggles and what you need, and He's going to make a way.
That's good. I like
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Well, I hope that O'Fallon has record-breaking attendance Christmas or the 15th, whenever that is.
Me too.
I
Yes.
hope and pray, something I pray every week, confession. I pray over services, of course, but I also pray, Lord, let the technology glorify you too, okay?
Oh, yes.
I do,
Oh,
seriously.
yes.
Which, yeah, before we go though,
Yeah.
do you, I'm sure it's happened, but do you get like nervous about certain tech things that you're like, I really hope this cooperates today on Sundays,
Yes,
Wednesdays?
I mean, literally this past Sunday, all of our lights were strobing.
Oh
Our
no.
piano was malfunctioning. The video, we had an offering video, wouldn't play. I
Oh
mean, literally that
yeah.
was just this past Sunday.
Oh gosh.
So yes, that happens all the time, and I'm with you. I am just praying. I am pacing the halls. People think I'm just talking to myself. I'm like, no, I'm praying over the lights right now. Don't mind me.
That's perfect. Yeah. And I'm not saying this to scare you, but the one of the recent faux pas tech wise we've had was it was Easter last year. Of course, Easter Sunday, Ableton was
Right.
just not cooperating. It was doing this
Ugh.
weird thing. I mean, not to get too technical, and I'm not even sure you'll know what I mean by this, but do y'all use arrangement view or session view? Do you know what I mean by that?
No, I have no idea.
So
I
when
probably should,
Yeah,
but
so when
no.
you're in Ableton, I'm assuming, is it like a big bank of songs and then you just kind of track them? Is that how it looks when you're doing that?
Yes.
Okay, so that's
Yes.
probably what's called session view. Arrangement view
Okay.
is like one giant long like track. And the beauty of arrangement view is you can like manipulate transitions however you want. You can throw in what's called MIDI cues to like cue lights or lyrics or whatever. Anyway, we were
Yeah.
using that version, which I'm new. Again, I'm new. I learned all this in this job. I didn't know how to do that. I figured it out somehow. But it was
Yeah.
Easter, and one of our songs in the middle of it, it just kept going back to the beginning of that song, and it's Easter
Oh
Sunday, and I'm like,
no.
what am I gonna do? And so I panicked, and the team, they're kudos to that team that week. They're like, hey, it's okay. They were trying to calm me down. They knew like I was worked up, and I'm like, let's move the
Yeah.
Ableton computer right next to Aaron, so he has control. And so, if you look on that Easter, you'll see the computer's next to me. It's because it was not cooperating, and I'm like, of
I'm
course
gonna
on
have
an
to go watch that.
yeah, I'm like, of course it's on Easter, But anyway, I rebuke all that
Right. Yes.
over the
Yes.
15th, over our Christmas Eve. The technology is going to
Yes.
glorify the Lord. It's going to be great.
Yes.
Looking forward to it. And feel free to reach out anytime. Seriously, on for tips or questions or just need someone to talk to. We're colleagues. We're in this together. So
Yeah. I appreciate that.
yeah. Well,
Thank
thanks
you.
again for being on. I'll let you get back to what you're doing. Thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for listening, and be sure to follow Restoration Podcast on Spotify and Apple. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe.